You're exhausted, aren't you? Not just physically tired, but soul-deep weary from constantly pushing, forcing, trying to bend reality to your will. Every single day you wake up with this invisible weight pressing down on your chest, the weight of having to control everything, manage everything, fix everything. Here's something that might shock you. That exhaustion isn't a sign of weakness. It's your soul screaming at you to stop. Stop fighting against the very nature of existence itself. What if I told you that everything you've been taught about success, about achievement, about how to live a meaningful life, is not just wrong, it's actively destroying you from the inside out? There's an ancient principle that could completely revolutionize how you experience every moment of your life. It's called Wu Wei, and it's about to shatter everything you think you know about effort, control, and what it truly means to be powerful. But before we dive deep into this life-changing concept, if you're ready to stop struggling and start flowing, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Trust me, you're going to want to follow this journey to its end. You see, Wu Wei isn't some mystical, unreachable philosophy reserved for monks sitting on mountaintops. It's a practical, urgent necessity for anyone suffocating under the crushing weight of modern expectations. The philosopher Alan Watts spent his entire life translating this ancient wisdom for people exactly like you, people trapped in the exhausting cycle of constant effort with diminishing returns. Think about your typical day. You wake up already running late in your mind. You check your phone and immediately flood your nervous system with other people's emergencies. You rush through breakfast, speed through traffic, force yourself to be productive at work, push through conversations you don't want to have, struggle to maintain relationships that drain you, and collapse into bed only to repeat this soul-crushing cycle tomorrow. This isn't living. This is surviving in a state of chronic resistance against life itself. Wu Wei literally translates to acting without forcing, but don't mistake this for laziness or passivity. This is actually the highest form of intelligence. The ability to recognize when you're swimming against a current that's stronger than you, and having the wisdom to turn around and let that current carry you towards something far better than what you could have planned. Imagine a skilled surfer facing a massive wave. A novice might try to fight the wave to power through it with brute force. They'd get crushed every single time, but the master surfer, they read the wave, feel its energy, and use that incredible force to launch themselves into an experience of pure flow and exhilaration. That's Wu Wei in action. Now, here's where this gets really interesting. Your mind right now is probably screaming, but if I don't control everything, won't everything fall apart? This fear is exactly what keeps you trapped. You've been conditioned since childhood to believe that letting go equals losing, that relaxing your grip means watching your life spiral into chaos. But what if the opposite is true? What if your desperate need to control everything is precisely what's preventing the good things from flowing into your life? Alan Watts had this brilliant way of explaining it. He said that life is like music. The point of a song isn't to get to the end as quickly as possible. The point is to dance with each note, to feel the rhythm, to be present for the melody as it unfolds. Yet we live as if life is a race to be won rather than a dance to be experienced. You've been taught to be a warrior when what you really need to be is a dancer. Let me share something that might hit you right in the gut. How many opportunities have you missed because you were too busy forcing the wrong door to notice the right one opening? How many beautiful moments have passed you by because you were so focused on controlling what comes next that you couldn't be present for what's happening right now? The tragic irony is that the harder you grip, the more life slips through your fingers. It's like trying to hold water in your cupped hands. The tighter you squeeze, the faster it escapes. But here's the revolutionary part that most people never understand. Wu Wei isn't about giving up your power. It's about discovering where your real power actually lies. Your true strength isn't in your ability to force outcomes. It's in your capacity to respond skillfully to whatever life presents. Think about the most successful, fulfilled people you know. I'm not talking about the ones who are burned out and miserable despite their achievements. I'm talking about those rare individuals who seem to move through life with an almost magical ease, where opportunities seem to find them, where things just work out in their favor. What you're witnessing isn't luck. It's Wu Wei in action. These people have learned to work with the natural rhythms of life rather than against them. They've discovered that when you stop forcing, you start flowing. And when you start flowing, life becomes your collaborator rather than your opponent. Let me tell you about the moment this clicked for Alan Watts. He was struggling with his career, pushing hard to make things happen in the traditional academic world. The more he forced, the more resistance he encountered. Then he made a radical decision. He stopped trying to fit into the existing mold and started sharing these ancient teachings in his own authentic way. Suddenly, doors began opening that he never could have imagined. His books reached millions, his lectures transformed lives, and he became one of the most influential philosophers of the 20th century. But this didn't happen because he worked harder. It happened because he stopped working against his own nature. Now, I know what you're thinking. This sounds great in theory, but I have bills to pay, deadlines to meet, responsibilities that can't wait for me to find my flow. I hear you. And this is exactly where most people get Wu Wei completely wrong. Wu Wei doesn't mean becoming irresponsible or passive. It means becoming so deeply attuned to what's actually needed in each moment that your actions become incredibly efficient and effective. When you stop wasting energy fighting reality, you have so much more energy available for the actions that actually matter. It's like the difference between trying to start a fire by frantically rubbing two wet sticks together versus patiently finding dry kindling and working with the natural properties of combustion. One approach leaves you exhausted and frustrated. The other creates warmth and light with far less effort. Here's a question that might change everything for you. What would happen if you trusted life enough to stop micromanaging every detail? What if you approached your challenges like a chess master who can see the entire board rather than like a panicked player just reacting to the last move? The Taoists understood something that our culture has completely forgotten. They recognized that there's an intelligence woven into the fabric of existence itself. Call it the Tao, call it the natural order, call it whatever resonates with you. This intelligence is infinitely more vast and sophisticated than your individual mind could ever be. Wu Wei is about learning to sense this greater intelligence and align yourself with it instead of constantly fighting against it. It's about recognizing that you're not separate from life. You are life expressing itself in a unique form. But our Western mindset has a massive problem with this idea. We've been trained to believe that if we're not in control, we're out of control. We've been taught that relaxation equals laziness, that trusting means being naive, that going with the flow means giving up our dreams. This is the great lie that's keeping you exhausted. The truth is that when you learn to move with life rather than against it, you don't become less powerful, you become unstoppable. Not in the bulldozer sense, but in the water sense. Water is the softest thing on earth, yet it can carve through solid rock. It doesn't fight the obstacles in its path, it finds a way around them, under them, through them. And eventually, it reaches the ocean. This is the power of Wu Wei. This is what it means to be truly strong. Now, let me share with you the most practical aspect of this philosophy. Wu Wei isn't something you have to master before you can benefit from it. You can start applying it immediately, right now, in whatever situation you're facing. It begins with a simple shift in awareness. Instead of asking, "How can I force this to work?" start asking, "What is this situation trying to teach me?" What would the most natural response be? What would happen if I stopped pushing and started listening? This might sound simple, but it's revolutionary. Most of us are so addicted to effort, so convinced that struggle equals virtue, that we've forgotten how to recognize the path of least resistance. We've forgotten that ease isn't the enemy of achievement, it's often the doorway to it. Let me give you a concrete example. You're in a conversation with someone and they're getting defensive. Your old programming tells you to push harder, to convince them, to win the argument. Wu Wei suggests a different approach. What if you stopped trying to change their mind and instead got curious about what's really happening beneath their defensiveness? What if you responded to their emotional state rather than their words? Suddenly, the entire dynamic shifts. Instead of escalating conflict, you create space for understanding. Instead of building walls, you open doors. This isn't manipulation, it's wisdom. It's working with human nature rather than against it. The same principle applies to every area of your life. That business project that's been stuck. Instead of forcing it forward, what if you stepped back and looked for what's trying to emerge naturally? That relationship that's been struggling. What if you stopped trying to fix the other person and started examining what role you're playing in the dynamic? This is where Wu Wei becomes incredibly practical. It's not about being passive. It's about being strategically receptive. It's about developing the sensitivity to know when to act and when to wait, when to speak and when to listen, when to hold on and when to let go. But here's what really blew my mind when I first understood this. Wu Wei doesn't just change what you do, it changes who you become. When you stop constantly fighting against life, you discover parts of yourself that were buried under layers of effort and anxiety. You reconnect with your natural creativity, your intuitive wisdom, your capacity for joy. You remember what it feels like to be truly alive. Alan Watts used to say that we've forgotten how to play. We've turned everything into work, everything into a problem to be solved rather than an experience to be lived. We've become so focused on outcomes that we've lost touch with the present moment, the only place where life actually happens. Wu Wei is ultimately about returning to play, not childish irresponsibility, but the kind of playful engagement that comes from deep trust in life itself. It's about approaching your challenges with curiosity rather than anxiety, with creativity rather than force, with wisdom rather than worry. This shift in perspective changes everything. Your work becomes more creative and effective. Your relationships become deeper and more authentic. Your mind becomes calmer and clearer. Your body releases chronic tension you didn't even know you were carrying. But perhaps most importantly, you start to feel like yourself again. Not the stressed, exhausted, constantly pushing version of yourself, but the natural, flowing, authentically powerful version that's been waiting beneath all that unnecessary effort. Now, I want to be completely honest with you about something. Embracing Wu Wei in a culture that worships busyness isn't easy. You're going to face resistance, not just from others, but from your own conditioned mind. There will be moments when that old voice starts screaming at you that you're being lazy, that you're falling behind, that you need to push harder. This is normal. This is part of the process. The key is to recognize these thoughts as the mental habits they are, not as truth. They're the voice of a system that profits from your exhaustion, your anxiety, your constant state of feeling inadequate. Wu Wei is an act of rebellion against this system. It's a return to your natural state of being. It's choosing wisdom over worry, flow over force, presence over panic. Here's something beautiful that happens when you really start living this way. Other people notice. They can't quite put their finger on what's different about you, but they sense something. There's less urgency in your energy, less desperation in your actions. You become magnetic in a completely natural way because you're finally being authentically yourself. People are drawn to those who have found their natural rhythm because it reminds them of something they've lost, the ability to be present, to be at ease, to trust life enough to stop fighting it every step of the way. This isn't about becoming complacent or losing your edge. If anything, you become more effective because you're no longer wasting energy on internal resistance. You're like a river that's finally flowing downhill instead of trying to flow uphill. The movement becomes effortless and powerful. But the most profound change is internal. You start to experience a quality of peace that doesn't depend on external circumstances. Not the fragile peace that requires everything to go your way, but the unshakable peace that comes from being aligned with the way things actually are. This is what the ancient masters meant when they talked about inner stillness. It's not the absence of movement, it's movement that flows from a deep center of calm. It's being like the eye of a hurricane, completely peaceful at the center while powerful forces move around you. Wu Wei teaches you to be this eye of the storm in your own life. No matter what chaos is happening around you, you maintain that core of stillness that allows you to respond rather than react, to choose rather than be driven by unconscious patterns. And here's the miracle. When you embody this kind of centered presence, life starts responding to you differently. Opportunities begin appearing. Conflicts resolve more easily. People become more receptive to you. It's as if the universe recognizes that you're finally working with it rather than against it, and it starts working with you in return. This isn't wishful thinking or spiritual bypassing. This is about understanding and aligning with the actual principles that govern how life works. When you stop creating unnecessary friction, energy flows more freely. When you stop forcing outcomes, natural intelligence can operate. When you trust the process starts supporting you. Now, let me share with you one of the most powerful practices for cultivating Wu Wei in your daily life. It's something you can start doing immediately, and it will begin shifting your experience of life from the very first day you try it. It's called the practice of conscious non-resistance. Throughout your day, whenever you notice yourself getting tense, frustrated, or anxious, pause and ask yourself, what am I resisting right now? Then, instead of trying to change whatever you're resisting, simply breathe and allow it to be exactly as it is for just one moment. This isn't about giving up or becoming passive. It's about creating space between you and your automatic reactions. In that space, wisdom can emerge. In that space, you can choose your response rather than being hijacked by your conditioning. Most people live their entire lives in a state of chronic resistance, resisting what is, resisting what was, resisting what might be. This resistance is exhausting. It's like trying to stop a river with your bare hands. Wu Wei is about stepping aside and letting the river flow, then deciding how you want to engage with it. This practice alone can transform your life, because when you stop fighting reality, you finally have the energy and clarity to engage with it skillfully. You stop being a victim of circumstances and become a conscious participant in your own experience. But the deepest level of Wu Wei is about recognizing something that might fundamentally change how you see yourself and your place in the world. You are not separate from the intelligence that moves the stars, grows the trees, and beats your heart. You are an expression of that same intelligence. When you truly understand this, effort becomes natural and struggle becomes unnecessary. You're no longer trying to impose your small will on the universe. You're discovering how your individual expression can harmonize with the larger symphony of existence. This is what enlightenment really means. Not some otherworldly state of perfection, but the simple recognition that you don't have to fight life because you are life. You don't have to force flow because flow is your natural state when you remove the obstacles you've been placing in your own path. So here's my challenge to you. For the next week, experiment with doing less effort, not less action. Notice where you're pushing unnecessarily. Notice where you're creating friction through resistance. Notice where you're trying to force outcomes instead of creating conditions for those outcomes to emerge naturally. Pay attention to what happens when you approach your challenges like a skilled dancer rather than like a battering ram. Notice how your energy changes, how your relationships shift, how your effectiveness actually increases when you stop trying so hard. This isn't about becoming passive or losing your ambition. It's about discovering that there's a more elegant, sustainable, and ultimately more powerful way to move through life. It's about remembering that you're not here to conquer existence, you're here to dance with it. The invitation of Wu Wei is simple but radical. Stop fighting the river of your life and start learning to navigate it with wisdom, grace, and trust. When you do this, you don't lose yourself, you find yourself. You don't become weaker, you discover your true strength. And perhaps most importantly, you finally get to experience what it feels like to be fully alive instead of just surviving. Because that's what Wu Wei ultimately offers. Not just a philosophy or a practice, but a return to the natural joy and ease that is your birthright as a conscious being in this incredible, mysterious universe. The path of least resistance isn't the path of least achievement. It's often the path of greatest wisdom. And wisdom, not force, is what creates lasting change in this world. Your exhaustion isn't a character flaw. It's a wake-up call. Life is inviting you to remember who you really are beneath all that unnecessary struggle. The question is, are you ready to accept that invitation? If this message has stirred something in you, if you can feel the truth of it resonating in your bones, then you're already beginning to remember. The transformation you seek isn't something you have to create through force. It's something you allow to emerge through wisdom. Welcome to the beginning of your journey home to yourself. Welcome to Wu Wei.